All right, we're in the helicopter flying handbook. We're chapter 8. We're going to be on page 4 of 6, safety in and around helicopters, right after aircraft servicing. All right, people have been injured, some fatally, in helicopter accidents that would not have occurred had they been informed of the proper method of boarding or deplaning. Properly briefed passengers should never be endangered by a spinning rotor. The simplest method of avoiding accidents of this sort is to stop the rotors before passengers are boarded or allowed to depart. Because this action is not always practicable, and to realize the vast and unique capabilities of the helicopter, it is often necessary to take on passengers or have them exit the helicopters while the engine and rotors are turning. To avoid accidents, it is essential that all persons associated with the helicopter's operations, including passengers, be made aware of all possible hazards and instructed how those hazards can be avoided. Ramp attendants and aircraft servicing personnel. These personnel should be instructed as to their specific duties and the proper method of fulfilling them. In addition, the ramp attendant should be taught to keep passengers and unauthorized persons out of the helicopter landing and takeoff area, brief passengers on the best way to approach and board a helicopter with its rotors turning. Persons directly involved with boarding and deplaning passengers, aircraft servicing, rigging, or hooking up external loads, etc., should be instructed as to their duties. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to cover each and every type of operation related to helicopters. A few of the more obvious and more common ones are covered below. Passengers. All persons boarding a helicopter while its rotors are turning should be taught the safest means of doing so. The pilot in command, the pick, should always brief the passengers prior to the engine start to ensure complete understanding of all procedures. The exact procedures may vary slightly from one helicopter model to another, but the following should suffice as a generic guide. When boarding, stay away from the rear of the helicopter. Approach or leave the helicopter in a crouching manner. Approach from the side, but never out of the pilot's line of vision. Many helicopters have dipping front blades due to landing gear configurations. For that reason, it is informally accepted for personnel to approach from the sides of the helicopter. Personnel should always be cautioned about approaching from the rear due to the tail rotor hazard, even for helicopters such as the BO-105 and the BK-117. Carry tools horizontally below waist level, never upright or over the shoulder. Hold firmly onto hats and loose articles. Never reach up or dart after a hat or other object that might be blown off or away. Protect eyes by shielding them with a hand or by squinting. If suddenly blinded by dust or blowing objects, stop and crouch lower. Better yet, sit down and wait for help. Safety around helicopters. Approaching or leaving a helicopter. Nice. Do not approach or leave the helicopter without the pilot's visual acknowledgement. Keep the pilot's field of vision at all times. Observe helicopter safety zones. On sloping ground, always approach or leave on the downslope side of the maximum rotor clearance. If blinded by swirling dust or grit, stop, crouch lower, or sit down and wait for assistance. If disembarking while a helicopter is at the hover, get out and off in smooth and unhurried manner. Do not approach or leave a helicopter when the engine and rotors are running down or starting up. And prohibited. Acceptable and prohibited. Acceptable is the green area. Preferred right at the side. Prohibited is the rear. More green. Proceed in a crouching manner for extra rotor clearance. Hold on to hat unless chin straps are used. Never reach up or chafe over a hat or other articles that are blown away. Carry tools, etc. horizontally below waist, never caught upright or on the shoulder. Never grope or feel your way towards or away from the helicopter. Protect hearing by wearing earplugs or earmuffs. Since few helicopters carry cabin attendants, the pilots must conduct the pre-takeoff and pre-landing briefings, usually before takeoff, and due to noise and cockpit layout. The type of operation dictates that sort of briefing necessary. All briefings should include the following. Here we go. Ready? What are we at? 4 minutes. All briefings should include the following. The use and operation of seat belts for takeoff and en route and landing. For overwater flights, the location and use of flotation gear and other survival equipment that might be on board also include how and when to abandon the helicopter should ditching become necessary. For flights over rough or isolated terrain, all occupants should be told where maps and survival gear are located. Passengers should be informed as to what actions and precautions to take in event of emergency, such as body position for best spinal protection against a highly vertical impact landing, erect with back firmly against the seat back, and when and how to exit after landing. Ensure the passengers are aware of the location of the fire extinguisher, survival equipment, and if equipped, how to use and locate the emergency position indicator radio beacon. That's the EPIRB. That's an emergency position indicator radio beacon. Smoking should not be permitted within 50 feet of all aircraft on the ground. Smoking could be permitted upwind from any possible fuel fumes at the discretion of the pilot, except under the following conditions: during all ground operations, during takeoff or landing, when carrying flammable or hazardous materials. When passengers are approaching or leaving a helicopter that is sitting on a slope with the rotors turning, they should approach and depart downhill. This affords the greatest distance between the rotor blades and the ground. If this involves walking around the helicopter, it should always go around the front, never the rear. Pilots at the flight controls. Many helicopter operators have been lured into a quick turnaround ground operation to avoid delays in airport terminals and to minimize stop-start cycles at the engine. As part of the quick turnaround, the pilot might leave the cockpit with the engine and rotors returning. Such an operation can be extremely hazardous if a gust of wind disturbs the rotor disc or the collective flight control moves, causing lift to be generated by the rotor system. Either occurrence may cause the helicopter to roll or pitch, resulting in a rotor blade striking the tail boom or the ground. Good operating procedures dictate that generally pilots remain at the flight controls whenever the engine is running and the rotors are turning. If operation requires the pilot to leave the cockpit to refuel, the throttle should be rolled back to flight idle and all controls firmly friction to prevent uncommanded control movements. The pilot should be well trained on setting controls and exiting the cockpit without disturbing the flight or power controls. After landing and securing. When the flight is terminated, park the helicopter where it does not interfere with other aircraft and is not a hazard to people during shutdowns. For many helicopters, it is advantageous to land with the wind coming from the right over the tail boom, counter-rotating blades. This tends to lift the blades over the tail boom but lowers the blades in front of the helicopter. This action decreases the likelihood of the main rotor strike to the tail boom due to gusty winds. Land with the wind coming from the right over the tail boom. This tends to lift the blades over the tail boom, but lowers the blades from the front of the helicopter. This action decreases the likelihoods of a main rotor strike to the tail boom due to gusty winds. Rotor downwash can cause damage to other aircraft in close proximity, and spectators may not realize the danger or see the rotors turning. Passengers should remain in the helicopter with their seat belts secured until the rotors have stopped turning. During the shutdown and post-flight inspections, follow the manufacturer's checklist. Any discrepancies should be noted and, if necessary, reported to maintenance personnel. Chapter summary. This chapter explained the importance of pre-flight and safety when conducting helicopter ground operations. Proper procedures for engine run-up, refueling, and ground safety were detailed, and the responsibilities of the pilot when maintenance issues occur before flight. So that was Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Ground Procedures and Flight Preparations. See ya.